Have you ever felt strangely calm when messages go unanswered? Relieved when plans fall apart? Or most like yourself when you're completely alone? Not because you're hurting, but because the quiet feels like home. If that sounds familiar, this story isn't about what's wrong with you. It's about what most people never understand. Have you noticed this pattern in yourself? You don't rush to reply. You feel a subtle sense of relief when plans are canceled. You intentionally choose solitude, not because you're depressed or disconnected, but because it genuinely feels right. When this happens, people often jump to conclusions. They assume you're lonely, emotionally distant, or socially impaired. But what if that interpretation is completely wrong? In a world that never stops speaking, choosing quiet is treated like a warning sign. We live in a culture that confuses visibility with wellness, instant replies with worth, and constant engagement with happiness. So when you pull back, no one pauses to ask why. They label you instead. What they fail to see is this: for many people, being alone isn't an act of retreat, it's an act of regulation. Some nervous systems simply reach saturation faster. Excess noise fractures attention. Too much interaction doesn't energize, it drains. Solitude, in these cases, isn't depressing. It's stabilizing. It's where the body relaxes and the mind finally regains clarity. But silence unsettles others. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't perform a connection. And because of that, it often gets pathologized. That's why most advice misses the mark. You're told to socialize more, to push through discomfort, to stay visible. But none of that works, because the problem was never a lack of people. It was overload. In this video, we'll explore the psychology of those who choose solitude, why some nervous systems are designed for quiet, how solitude differs fundamentally from isolation, and why preferring to be alone is often a sign of self-awareness, not dysfunction. Before deciding that people who seek solitude are broken, let's ask a better question. What if they're not withdrawing from life, but choosing the only way of living that allows them to stay whole? Let's begin. We often talk about being alone as if it's a single emotional experience, as though one word could capture every internal state that comes with it. But psychologically, two very different realities exist under the same label. Loneliness and solitude are not the same. They don't even activate the same systems in the body. Loneliness is a deficit state. It arises when the need for connection isn't met. You can feel lonely in a crowd, in a relationship, even while constantly surrounded by people. Loneliness isn't about physical separation. It's about emotional absence. And it's exhausting because your system is always searching for something it can't find. Solitude is the opposite. It isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose. When you enter solitude, you're not missing connection. You're resting from it. Your nervous system isn't scanning for approval or reassurance. It's settling, breathing, reorganizing. In solitude, you're not waiting to be seen. You're allowing yourself to exist without evaluation. This is why psychologists use the term aloneliness. It describes the irritation or frustration that appears when someone who needs time alone doesn't get enough of it. For these individuals, constant interaction isn't nourishing, it's depleting. Without solitude, they don't just feel tired, they feel scattered, unfocused, slightly unanchored. Language matters here. Loneliness feels heavy because it pulls you outward, toward what's missing. Solitude feels grounding because it brings you back inward to what's already there. One drains energy through absence, the other restores it through presence. So when someone says they enjoy being alone, they're not rejecting people. They're acknowledging something essential. Their relationship with themselves isn't a placeholder, it's a foundation. And that distinction changes everything. When people are described as too quiet or too sensitive to social environments, it's often framed as a personality flaw, something to correct with confidence, exposure, or practice. But what if the issue isn't personality at all? What if it's physiology? For many who prefer solitude, social interaction isn't emotionally painful, it's neurologically expensive. Their nervous systems process stimulation more intensely. Conversations demand more cognitive effort. Background noise, shifting social cues, and constant emotional monitoring accumulate faster. This is why some people leave social gatherings energized, while others leave feeling hollow, not sad or offended, just depleted. Many recognize this feeling once they hear the term social hangover, that foggy, overexposed state after too much interaction, difficulty concentrating, irritability, a craving for silence that feels almost physical. This isn't avoidance, it's recovery. Highly sensitive nervous systems reach saturation sooner. Once that limit is crossed, the body shifts from engagement into self-protection. Attention narrows, muscles tighten. The mind turns inward, not because it dislikes people, but because it needs stability. Needing less stimulation doesn't mean needing less connection. It means needing connection in different doses, at different rhythms, shorter interactions, deeper conversations, and longer recovery periods. Quiet time isn't escaping life. It's the maintenance that allows you to return to it intact. So before labeling yourself as broken or antisocial, consider this. You may not be withdrawing because something is wrong with you. You may be listening to a nervous system that knows exactly what it needs. There's a psychological idea that helps explain why solitude nourishes some people and exhausts others. It's known as the savanna theory of happiness. In simple terms, it suggests that our brains still carry preferences shaped by early human environments, small groups, predictable rhythms, and familiar faces. For most people, frequent social interaction aligns with that wiring. But there's an interesting exception. Studies have found that individuals with higher cognitive complexity often report lower life satisfaction when they socialize more frequently. Not because they dislike people, but because their attention is oriented elsewhere, toward ideas, long-term goals, and abstract problems that require uninterrupted focus. Depth changes the equation. When your mind is constantly simulating possibilities, questioning assumptions, or building internal models of reality, casual interaction can feel like friction. Not wrong, just misaligned. Socializing becomes pleasant but costly. It consumes mental bandwidth needed for thinking, creating, and integrating experience. This is why many historically deep thinkers protected their solitude, not out of arrogance, but necessity. Still, it's important to be clear. Preferring solitude doesn't mean you're more intelligent. Intelligence isn't a moral badge, and it appears in many forms: emotional, relational, practical, creative. Likewise, many highly intelligent people thrive socially. This isn't about superiority, it's about alignment. Some minds process the world outwardly through exchange. Others process inwardly through reflection. Neither is better. But confusing one for the other creates unnecessary shame. If socializing drains you, it doesn't mean you're defective or exceptional. It may simply mean your mind prioritizes depth over frequency, meaning over motion, integration over stimulation. Once you understand this, the pressure to perform connection the right way begins to loosen. You stop asking what's wrong with you and start asking what environment allows your mind to function best. Eventually, the word introvert stops being enough. It explains where your energy goes, but not how you navigate the world. It doesn't capture the deeper pattern behind people who stand slightly apart, not out of fear, but out of self-direction. Psychologically, these individuals score high in autonomy. Autonomy isn't rugged independence or antisocial detachment. It's the ability to regulate yourself from within. Your values aren't borrowed from the room. Your self-worth doesn't rise and fall with approval. When making decisions, you look inward before outward. This changes everything. While many people unconsciously scan social environments for cues on how to act, self-guided individuals rely on an internal compass. From the outside, this can look like detachment or emotional distance. Internally, there's steadiness, less urgency to be understood, less fear of being misread. This is also why praise feels oddly unsatisfying and criticism less devastating. Their nervous systems aren't calibrated to constant feedback. Autonomy reduces noise. It allows room for long-term thinking, ethical consistency, and emotional self-trust. Because they don't rely on social mirroring to feel real, they can be alone without collapsing into doubt. They're not withdrawing, they're anchored. For many people, small talk is harmless, a social warm-up. But for those oriented toward depth, it can feel quietly exhausting. Not because it's awkward, but because it lacks meaning. It demands performance without engagement. Smiling, reacting, tracking cues that don't matter. The mind stays busy but unstimulated. Over time, this creates fatigue that's hard to explain to those who enjoy social ease. Silence begins to feel preferable, not as rejection, but honesty. Depth-oriented individuals don't dislike conversation. They dislike friction without substance. They're drawn to exchanges that go somewhere. Ideas, inner worlds, contradictions, truth. There's also the cost of masking. In shallow interactions, many wear a simplified version of themselves. For someone with a rich inner world, that mask feels like a slow erasure. So choosing silence becomes self-preservation, saving energy for moments that nourish. When solitude is chosen, it becomes more than rest. It becomes an incubator. Attention stops fragmenting. There's no one to impress, no emotional weather to track. In that absence of demand, the mind organizes itself. This is why solitude is linked to creativity and insight. Thoughts unfold fully, emotions surface and integrate. Neurologically, this inward state activates calm, focused reward systems, the foundation of flow. Solitude doesn't create brilliance. It creates conditions where ideas aren't rushed into performance, and self-expression doesn't need an audience. It's not escaping life. It's where life is quietly assembled before being carried back into the world with clarity. But solitude can become armor. The difference is subtle. Healthy solitude restores. Defensive solitude avoids. When silence becomes rigid, when connection feels threatening, solitude has turned into hiding. This often forms after repeated misunderstanding. Distance starts to feel safer. The nervous system learns a dangerous lesson. Distance equals safety. Warning signs are quiet, bitterness, emotional narrowing, and disinterest in being known. Even the most self-directed people need connection, not constant, but real. A few relationships where silence isn't misread and space isn't punished. Solitude should be a place you visit, not vanish into. Healthy solitude is about balance. Fewer relationships, deeper ones. Cycles of withdrawal and return. Reflection followed by participation. A small, safe circle where space is allowed. It also requires noticing when withdrawal has gone too far. If solitude no longer restores you, it's time to gently reopen the door, not to everyone, just to what's safe. The strongest solitude doesn't reject humanity. It refines your relationship to it. There's a quiet strength in being at ease with yourself. When you're comfortable alone, you stop chasing noise to feel real. You choose connection instead of clinging to it. In a world that demands constant attention, choosing quiet is freedom. If this video puts words to something you felt but never explained, you're not alone here. What does solitude give you that the world doesn't?